Chapter 1, The Return of the Departed Soul, The Systems Game. I drifted in midair, watching as the 10th attacker turned to ashes in a burst of white light. A cold sneer curled at the corner of my lips. This body, named Ella Kendall, was my vessel in this world. 3 years ago, an accident tore my soul from my physical form, leaving me a wandering spirit. In the meantime, this body had been chosen by a higher dimensional system as a target conquest vessel. The system selected 10 so-called optimal attackers, sending them one after another to occupy my body. Their mission, to win over the heirs of Iowa's 8 major industrial families, Elias Hansen, Samuel White, Theodore Lane, Declan Murphy. These young men stood at the top of the pyramid, their families controlling the lifelines of the state's agricultural machinery manufacturing, biotechnology research and development, and grain trade. The system had calculated shrewdly. It detected that each of these men had an initial favorability rating of no less than 90 toward Ella Kendall. But it forgot, human hearts are not cold data. Especially these young men, who grew up amid the power struggles of their families, their perception of the soul was far keener than that of ordinary people. The attackers' clumsy tactics, handmade lucky stars stuffed in glass jars, humiliating vigils outside family manors late at night, wrist slashing to gain sympathy, deliberate fawning by mimicking their preferences. Each attempt only deepened the young men's disgust. They knew perfectly well that the soul inside this body was no longer the eldest daughter of the Kendall family who once wielded a brush on the motto stone of the elite academy affiliated to the University of Iowa, or held her own against a room full of rivals at the state's Youth Entrepreneurs Forum. After all, Iowa's industrial families valued nothing more than authenticity and ability. False flattery only filled them with greater contempt. Arrogant ants, do you think you can do it? The system's mechanical voice trembled with anger. The 10 attackers it had carefully selected hadn't even come close to winning over their targets, they hadn't so much as touched the hem of their clothes. Instead, they'd sent the favorability ratings plummeting. I looked down at the system's energy form, my tone arrogant yet resolute. Want to make a bet? Let me go back. Within 3 months, I guarantee I'll make all your so-called targets fall for me. I paused, emphasizing my words. Unlike the losers you picked, they couldn't even touch a button on their shirts. The system fell silent for a long time. With no other choice, it finally relented. 48 hours. If you fail the first phase mission, you'll suffer 10 times worse than them. Deal. After a blinding flash of white light, I abruptly opened my eyes. A cloying scent of cheap perfume lingered in my nostrils, making me nauseous. This was a bedroom cluttered with pink lace, Hello Kitty stickers covered the bed, curtains, and even the walls. It had been decorated by one of the attackers to curry favor with Declan Murphy. Declan had a younger sister who passed away at an early age, and her favorite color had been pink. The Murphy family ran Iowa's largest children's charity foundation in Des Moines. This kind of deliberate affection only felt grotesquely ironic. A sharp pain shot through my wrist. I lowered my head to see a gruesome scar stretching across it, left by the 8th attacker in a desperate attempt to win back Samuel White. My eyes turned icy cold in an instant. How dare these losers ruin my body like this? The White family was Iowa's top legal dynasty, and Samuel loathed cowardly acts like self-harm to gain sympathy. Such foolishness could only intensify his disgust. I tore down the eyesore Hello Kitty curtains in one swift motion. Sunlight flooded the room, illuminating the mess on the floor. Unsent lucky stars piled up in the corner, and sheet music imitating Elias Hansen's style lay on the desk. Elias was Iowa's youngest classical pianist, having held a solo recital at the Des Moines Art Center. His music was filled with the vastness and depth of the prairie, something no shoddy imitation could replicate. The wardrobe was crammed with frilly, sweet dresses that were nothing like my style. I had always preferred sleek, tailored suits. That was the demeanor a Kendall heir ought to have. Young lady, the master asks that you A butler's voice came from the doorway, trailing off as I grabbed a glass jar from the desk and smashed it violently onto the floor. Shards of glass scattered everywhere, and the lucky stars inside spilled out like the attacker's ridiculous dreams. Stepping over the shards, I descended the spiral staircase one step at a time. In the dining room, Richard Kendall, my father, bowed his head, poring over quarterly financial reports. His hair had turned much grayer than 3 years ago, and his fingers trembled slightly as he held the papers. Since I had changed, the Kendall family's position among the 8 major industrial families had become precarious. Our core business, agricultural equipment exports, was losing market share to competitors. His expectations for this suddenly ruined daughter had long since faded. "I hear you're having me withdrawn from school." I sat down abruptly, cutting through his silence. Richard didn't look up. The board of directors at the elite academy affiliated to the University of Iowa has made a decision. Ranking last in Class C1 has severely damaged the Kendall family's reputation. This academy was the ultimate cradle of power and wealth in Iowa. Being expelled meant being completely disowned by the Kendall family, in a circle that valued family honor. Above all, this was more unthinkable than bankruptcy. "I'll take back what's mine." My voice was calm yet carried an undeniable authority. "Give me one last chance at next month's monthly exam. If I fail, I'll voluntarily give up all my inheritance rights and shares, and cut all ties with the Kendall family forever." Richard suddenly lifted his head, his gaze fixed firmly on me. He must have seen a glimmer of the girl I was 3 years ago, the high-spirited, unstoppable eldest daughter of the Kendall family, the prodigy who at 15 had formulated a plan to expand the family's agricultural equipment market into Minnesota. After a long while, he sighed and conceded, "One last month." A black Lincoln sedan pulled up at the entrance of the elite academy affiliated to the University of Iowa. I pushed open the car door, leaning against the vehicle as I looked up. On the massive motto stone at the school gate, the words I had inscribed 3 years ago were still visible: "A heart harboring vast horizons, hands capable of plucking stars." Back then, I had been the brightest star in this academy, a genius excelling in finance, music, languages, and more, an existence all the young men looked up to. After all, in Iowa, there was no other girl who was proficient in both German, for communicating with the state's many German-American farmers, and Spanish, for interacting with agricultural workers, while also winning top honors in finance competitions. "Well, if it isn't our Miss Kendall?" A sharp female voice rang out. Peyton Rivers, a girl with wavy hair, swaggered over, jabbing the tip of her fountain pen maliciously at my back. "I heard you crashed the Murphy family's charity gala last week and got thrown into the pool like garbage by Declan. How did that feel?" The girls beside her snickered in agreement, and she even dared to touch Elias's piano. "She got thrown out along with the piano, ha ha ha." Elias's Steinway piano was the prize he had won at the Iowa Youth Piano Competition. It meant more to him than anything. The attacker's insult had undoubtedly crossed his bottom line. Just then, the system's mechanical voice suddenly echoed in my mind: Phase 1 mission, raise target Elias Hansen's emotional fluctuation value to 50. Target profile, Elias Hansen, heir to the Hansen family, one of the 8 major industrial families, Iowa's youngest classical pianist, a music fanatic. Time limit, 47H59M. The harsh laughter continued. I slowly turned around, a smile playing on my lips, but it didn't reach my eyes. A crisp slap echoed through the air, and the world fell silent in an instant. Peyton clutched her cheek, staring at me in disbelief as a bright red handprint bloomed on her skin. "How dare you hit me?" She trembled with rage, her voice cracking. "Do you think you're still the Ella Kendall you were 3 years ago? You're nothing but a cast-off from the Kendall family now." The Rivers family was merely a moderately successful trading clan in Iowa, always clinging to the coattails of the 8 major industrial families. Peyton's arrogance was nothing more than borrowed courage. She screamed and lunged at me, intent on tearing my uniform. I sidestepped her easily. She lost her balance and crashed heavily to the ground, gritting her teeth in pain. The onlookers gasped. No one had seen me move. I knelt down slightly, grabbing her by the collar and forcing her to look up. My peach-shaped eyes, adorned with a teardrop mole at the corner, curved into a smile, but my voice was cold as ice. You've wasted 3 precious minutes of my time. What do you plan to do to make amends? That's enough. A clear, rich voice sounded. Samuel White stood a few steps away. Tall and slender, he wore an immaculately pressed student council uniform, exuding an icy detachment that kept everyone at a distance. He flipped through a thick stack of disciplinary records, my achievements over the past 3 years, courtesy of the attackers. From harassing Elias at the campus music festival to crying and making a scene outside the White family's law firm, every entry filled Samuel, this future lawyer, with disdain. Target detected, Samuel White. Initial favorability rating, 70. 13th incident of disturbing campus order, 5th case of violent conflict. Samuel's fingertips brushed over the page as he signed the disciplinary notice with a neat, sharp stroke. Ms. Ella Kendall, in accordance with school rules, the student council has the authority to expel you. So rigid and impartial, aren't you, President? I took a step forward, my posture lazy and laced with deliberate provocation. The fabric of my expensive custom uniform brushed lightly against the hollow of his collarbone, a place where I had once left a faint bite mark during a playful scuffle at our camp in Iowa State Park 3 years ago. Back then, he had laughed and called me a little maniac. Samuel's eyes darkened. He reached out to push me away, but a familiar scent suddenly flooded his nostrils. It was my signature fragrance, blended by me using essential oils from Iowa's native coneflowers and chamomile, one of a kind, impossible for the attackers to replicate. This scent held memories of the days we had spent picking flowers and herbs on the family farm together. His pupils constricted sharply. He snapped back to his senses, grabbing my wrist and slamming me against the motto stone. His voice, thick with repressed anger, exploded in my ear. You don't deserve to wear this scent. Go back to Class C. If I catch you causing trouble again, I'll personally throw you out of this academy. His grip was so tight it felt like he would crush my bones. Target Samuel White. Favorability rating, 80. The system's mechanical voice sounded faintly mocking. Yet I smiled faintly, not the least bit flustered. An increase in favorability? No, this wasn't affection, it was loathing. He loathed the attackers who had occupied my body, loathed the foolish things they had done in my name, loathed the way they had defiled my scent. To me, this loathing was the perfect starting point. Among Iowa's elite families, loathing, at least meant, caring, far better than being completely ignored. Chapter 2, A Financial Thunderclap, Theodore Lane's Shock and Suspicion. The moment I stepped into Class C1, the air seemed to freeze. Word of the morning's incident at the school gate had spread like wildfire across the entire campus. In this tight-knit elite circle, even the smallest stir could spark a tempest. I had once been a legend at the elite academy affiliated to the University of Iowa, admitted to the high school division with a perfect score, sweeping all academic competitions, and at 15, formulating a groundbreaking cross-border agricultural equipment acquisition plan that stunned the industry. But now, I was the last-ranked student in Class C1, a laughingstock of the entire school. Countless complex gazes landed on me, contempt, sympathy, and curiosity. I ignored them all, striding straight toward my seat in the corner. Quit putting on an act. You're just a dropout to be, a boy with dyed blonde hair sneered loudly. He was Justin Lewis, the class monitor of C1 and a suitor of Peyton Rivers. The Lewis family owned several small farms in Iowa, and they had long dreamed of currying favor with the Rivers family to gain access to the 8 major industrial clans. Justin's arrogance was nothing more than a show to impress Peyton. I paused mid-step, turning around slowly. My gaze locked onto him with pinpoint precision, my voice calm and steady. "You're being too loud." Justin's heart skipped a beat, and cold sweat instantly soaked his back. He tried to mask his fear by raising his voice. "Am I lying? You're always chasing after those young masters like a toad eyeing a swan. To everyone else, you're not even as good as a clown." A gust of wind rustled past. Justin's voice cut off abruptly. Several strands of hair fluttered down beside his cheek. He turned his head stiffly to see a fountain pen embedded deep in the wall behind him, less than half an inch from his temple. I sat down gracefully, propping one hand on my chin as I twirled another pen casually between my fingers. My voice was as light as a sigh. "Sorry." My hand slipped. The classroom fell deathly silent. Justin's face turned as pale as a sheet, his lips trembling as he stammered, "It's fine, Miss Kendall." In Iowa, strength was always the currency of respect. With that one move, I had made it clear that I was not someone he could afford to provoke. The bell rang. The next class was financial investment, taught by the seasoned Professor Alan Cohen, a luminary in the field who had once served as a financial advisor to the Hansen family. I had been his favorite student. He often said my sensitivity to Iowa's agricultural economy was far beyond that of my peers. "Hand in your homework from last class," Professor Cohen announced. I frowned, pulling a sheet of paper from my textbook. The assignment was a complex simulated analysis report on a cross-border agricultural equipment acquisition, the very core project the Lane family was currently preparing to launch. As Iowa's leading biotechnology dynasty, the Lanes planned to acquire a German seed research and development company to expand into the European market. Professor Cohen had held out little hope for the students of C1, collecting the homework was merely a formality. One by one, the other students submitted their reports. The professor glanced at them briefly before tossing them aside. When he reached me and saw that I was finishing the report on the spot, a look of disappointment crossed his face. He, too, must have thought that the once prodigal daughter had truly fallen from grace. But the moment I set down my pen and pushed the report toward him, Professor Cohen's expression changed completely. The page was covered with dense mathematical formulas and arrows, pinpointing the most hidden flaw in the acquisition plan, a fatal oversight that even Theodore Lane, the heir to the Lane family, had missed. Germany's environmental regulations imposed extremely strict emission standards on seed research companies, and the target company's core factory was in serious violation. If left unaddressed, the acquisition would result in astronomical fines. Not only had I identified the flaw, but I had also scribbled a reverse short-selling strategy in red ink beside it, specifying a leverage ratio of 1.15 and a net profit margin of at least 300%. This wasn't just homework, it was a threat that could destroy the Lane family. The Lanes had invested nearly half of their liquid assets in this acquisition. If anything went wrong, the entire family's business would collapse into crisis. Professor Cohen's hands trembled uncontrollably, causing the paper to rustle between his fingers. He looked up at me abruptly, his eyes wide with disbelief. "How could you? How do you know the details of the Lane family's acquisition plan, and how did you pinpoint this flaw so accurately?" Even he, a seasoned advisor, had only vaguely sensed the issue, yet I had laid it bare with crystal clarity. "Does Professor have any objections to my solution?" I propped my chin on one hand, lifting my eyes lazily. My casual tone sent the temperature in the classroom plummeting. Everyone held their breath. Even Justin clamped a hand over his mouth, afraid to make a sound. They might not have understood the full implications of the report, but Professor Cohen's reaction said it all. The once laughingstock had seemingly returned. Professor Cohen's expression shifted repeatedly. Finally, he took a deep breath, carefully folding the paper as his voice turned hoarse. "I will personally deliver this report to President Theodore." Theodore was not only the heir to the Lane family but also the president of the student council at the elite academy, wielding immense power on campus. "President Theodore? You mean Theodore Lane?" My God, Ella actually got Professor Cohen to deliver her report to President Theodore personally. The classroom erupted in an uproar. Theodore Lane, student council president, heir to the Lane family, and the next head of the clan, was an unattainable figure at the elite academy and throughout Iowa. Gifted not only in biotechnology but also in financial investment, he was the cream of the crop among the younger generation of the 8 major industrial families. I merely smiled softly and said no more. In Iowa, strength was the only pass. This report was just the first step in reclaiming everything that was mine. Meanwhile, in the student council office, Professor Cohen burst in, clutching the report in both hands, his voice trembling with barely contained excitement. "President Theodore, you must read this immediately." Theodore looked up from his papers, his cold gaze sweeping over the professor's ashen face. In his eyes, Professor Cohen had always been composed. Whatever had upset him must be extraordinary. He took the report, and the moment his eyes landed on the page, the refined aura surrounding him vanished completely, replaced by an overwhelming, suffocating coldness. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the paper tightly, his lips pressing into a thin, harsh line. The calculations on the page were precise to the point of cruelty, like a dagger piercing the carefully crafted plan he had been so proud of. He had always believed that only core family members and a handful of advisors knew the details of this acquisition. How could Ella Kendall, a discarded outcast from the Kendall family, possibly know all this? Who wrote this? His voice was low and steady, yet it dropped the room's temperature by 10 degrees. The Lanes were always this calm in the face of threats, calm, yet utterly deadly. "Ella Kendall, from Class C1, Professor Cohen whispered. He knew the impact this name would have on Theodore. Theodore froze, a flicker of surprise crossing his eyes. How could he forget that name? 3 years ago, Ella Kendall had been the legend of the elite academy, sitting in the very student council president's seat he now occupied, full of vigor and ambition, a target he had once struggled desperately to catch up to. They had fought side by side at the state's Youth Entrepreneurs Forum, offering ideas for Iowa's agricultural development. But overnight, she had seemed to transform, plummeting from the heights to the mud, reduced to a simpering fool. Could it be that she had been pretending all these years, biding her time? An absurd thought took hold of him, refusing to fade. Competition between the 8 major industrial families in Iowa never ceased. Had the Kendall family deliberately let Ella fall from grace to lull the other clans into complacency, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back? Chapter 3, Declan's Humiliation, the Counterattack. By lunchtime, rumors of Ella Kendall's groundbreaking financial report had spread like wildfire across the entire elite academy affiliated to the University of Iowa. In this small, tight-knit circle, news traveled far faster than anyone could imagine. Braving countless curious stares, I stepped into the Prairie House, the most secluded restaurant on the university campus. A favorite among the children of industrial families, it featured decor inspired by Iowa's prairie landscapes, with oil paintings of farm scenes by local artists hanging on the walls. Offering complete privacy, it was their preferred spot for discussing family business and exchanging information. A waiter led me to a quiet booth by the window in the back. I ordered a few simple dishes at random: grilled chicken breast with cornmeal, a classic Iowa comfort food and once my favorite meal. Propping my chin on one hand, my gaze drifted lazily out the window to the courtyard, where vast fields of corn and soybeans stretched out, evoking the endless farmlands of Iowa. Declan, a sweet, cloying female voice suddenly shattered the tranquility. My eyes flickered. Not far away, Declan Murphy sat down with a glamorous, heavily made-up girl draped over his arm. Declan, the heir to the Murphy family, was known for his unruly and violent temper. The Murphys ran Iowa's largest logistics and transportation company, controlling the lifeline of the state's agricultural product distribution. This power had made Declan arrogant and domineering from a young age. It was he who had thrown the attacker occupying my body into the pool at the Murphy family's manor not long ago. That attacker had snuck into the family's charity gala in a desperate attempt to get close to him, only to be harshly punished. The girl leaned against him limply, drawing circles on his chest with her finger. "Declan, will you accompany me to the music festival in Des Moines tonight?" Declan wore a lazy, indifferent smile, patting her back perfunctorily. "I'm busy." He was currently overseeing the upgrade of the family's logistics network and had no time for such trivialities. Declan is always like this. Could he have someone else in his heart? The girl pouted, casting a pointed glance in my direction. "I heard that Miss Kendall has completely changed her attitude today, acting all tough and intimidating. Do you think she's just trying to get your attention again?" She knew Declan detested Ella and deliberately made these remarks to curry favor with him. Declan's narrow eyes lifted lazily, following her gaze to me. The sunlight outlined my cold, graceful profile. There was no infatuation or flattery in my eyes, only a disregard that made him extremely uncomfortable. It was the same look he had seen in Ella Kendall 3 years ago, proud, confident, and utterly dismissive of everyone around her. A low laugh rumbled in Declan's throat, filled with unbridled contempt and amusement. He pinched the girl's chin, his voice loud enough to cut through the quiet restaurant. "She thinks she's worthy?" In his eyes, the current Ella Kendall was nothing but a worthless outcast, abandoned by her family and utterly beneath his notice. Dozens of eyes turned in our direction. Upon seeing it was Declan, they quickly looked away, but their ears pricked up, hanging on every word. In Iowa's industrial family circles, the Murphy family's every move was closely watched. No one dared to cross Declan. "Just looking at her makes me sick," Declan added, as if commenting on a piece of worthless trash. The foolish antics of the previous attackers, fawning over him with cheap gifts, cutting themselves for sympathy, had only deepened his disdain. Such behavior was an insult to the Murphy family. I turned around slowly, my face showing no anger or embarrassment at the humiliation. Instead, I leaned back lazily in my chair, sweeping my gaze over Declan from head to toe with deliberate slowness. Finally, I uttered a single word, cold and sharp: "Disgusting." The restaurant erupted in a collective gasp. No one could believe their ears. How dare someone speak to Declan Murphy like that, the most untouchable figure among Iowa's younger generation? The smile froze on Declan's face. He pushed the girl away abruptly, standing up and striding over to my table in a few steps. Leaning over, he braced his hands on the table, his eyes locking onto mine, searching for the familiar signs of infatuation, fear, or panic that had plagued the previous attackers, signs that would make him feel in control. But all he saw was a bottomless pool of coldness, flecked with mockery and condescending pity. This look filled him with an irrational irritation. He hated this feeling. He hated being looked at this way by Ella Kendall. "Ha!" Declan laughed, a cold, bitter sound filled with destructive madness. "You're putting on quite a show. Do you think hiding behind this icy facade will spark my interest? Playing hard to get?" He was convinced this was just another one of her clumsy tricks, designed to grab his attention. He leaned in closer, his breath fanning my face as he whispered a humiliating taunt: "Even if I were the filthiest man alive, I'd never lay a finger on you." Good riddance, I met his violent gaze without flinching, my voice calm and steady. "If you have nothing else to say, Mr. Murphy, I'd like to finish my meal. In Iowa, dignity was something you earned, not begged for. Unlike the previous attackers, I would never grovel to him just because of his status." A cold snort escaped Declan's nose. Like a cornered beast, he spun around and strode toward the door. The girl he had left behind stumbled after him in her high heels, only to be dismissed with an icy scoff: "You're ruining my appetite." His mind was now consumed by Ella Kendall's eyes, leaving no room for this simpering, fawning girl. With the commotion over, I turned my attention back to the delicate meal in front of me, my movements lazy and elegant, as if the entire incident had been nothing more than an insignificant farce. In Iowa's industrial family circles, calmness was an essential trait. Only those who could keep their cool could truly control the game. Time remaining, 44h32m. The system's cold mechanical voice echoed in my mind, a stark reminder that time was running out. I ignored it, stirring the soup in my bowl slowly. These so-called targets had all been spoiled by the previous attackers, believing everyone should revolve around them. To win them over, the first step was to shatter their arrogance. In Iowa, only equals earned respect. The afternoon foreign language class felt as natural as breathing. By the age of 15, I had already mastered 8 languages: English, French, German, Spanish, and more. I had learned German to communicate with Iowa's German-American farmers and Spanish to interact with agricultural workers, essential skills for the Kendall family's business. The 3-year gap had merely left a thin layer of dust, easily brushed away. When the bell rang, a student council member, wearing the council's badge on his chest, stepped into Class C1 under the watchful eyes of everyone and walked straight toward me. "Ms. Ella Kendall, President Theodore requests your presence in his office." I lifted my eyes slowly, glancing at him with a cold, clear voice. "Tell Theodore Lane that if he wants to see me, he can come himself." In Iowa, while the heirs of the 8 major industrial families had their own rankings, they were fundamentally equals. I would not lower my dignity to cater to him just because he was the student council president. Asking the student council president to come to Class C1 in person? The classroom fell deathly silent. In just half a day, I had shattered the word impossible with sheer strength and unyielding resolve. No one dared to question me, no one dared to even breathe too loudly. They all knew, the true Ella Kendall had returned. That evening, I walked toward the school gate. Beside the understated yet imposing black Lincoln sedan, Arnold, the Kendall family's chief butler, handed me a white towel respectfully. "Young lady, please clean your hands. The master and Master Cullen are waiting for you at the main residence." He emphasized the words, "Master Cullen," deliberately. Cullen Kendall was my distant cousin, an outstanding graduate of the elite academy affiliated to the University of Iowa, and now held an important position in the Kendall family's agricultural equipment research and development department. During my 3-year absence, he had gradually taken my place, becoming the Kendall family's new chosen heir. The family's intentions were clear. In the cutthroat competition between Iowa's major industrial families, the Kendalls needed a strong heir, and Cullen was their replacement. The car drove into the Kendall family's main residence, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Des Moines spanning hundreds of acres. In addition to the luxurious mansion, it also housed a small agricultural test field, a Kendall family tradition, a reminder to every family member that their roots lay in Iowa's soil. The hall was brightly lit, but the atmosphere was unusually tense. Richard sat on the main seat, his brows furrowed as a cigar smoked between his fingers. He had been plagued by the declining exports of the family's agricultural equipment. Several family directors sat on either side, their eyes filled with scrutiny and doubt. They were skeptical of my ability to reclaim my position as the family's heir. The most striking figure, however, was Cullen, standing beside Richard. Tall and imposing in a tailored charcoal gray suit, he cut a straight, upright figure. Handsome, with a pair of amber eyes hidden behind gold-rimmed glasses, his gaze fell on me with complete indifference, as if scanning an object before quickly moving away. To him, I was nothing more than a failure, on the verge of being disowned by the family, hardly a worthy rival. "You're back," Richard's voice broke the silence, tired and complicated. He felt both disappointment and a faint, unspoken glimmer of hope for me. Looking at this assembly, I curved my lips into a smile, my gaze sweeping calmly over the crowd before finally fixing on Cullen's perfect yet cold face. "Are you here to wait for me, or to pronounce my death sentence?" In Iowa's industrial families, directness was the best form of communication. Beating around the bush was nothing but a waste of time. Cullen adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses, masking the emotions in his eyes. "Reports of your repeated violations of school rules and disruption of campus order have been submitted to the board of directors. The 1-month reprieve uncle fought for you comes with a condition: you must behave yourself. His voice was steady, but every word was a knife, trapping me in a corner. He was warning me that one wrong move would cost me my last chance. The hall fell silent. The directors exchanged glances, and Richard said nothing. He knew the family was under immense pressure, and securing this reprieve for me had been the best he could do. I stared at him quietly, my eyes a bottomless pool of coldness. Suddenly, a sharp, clear laugh escaped me, echoing through the silent hall. How entertaining. I repeated the word, my tone dripping with undisguised contempt. I've never liked it when others touch what's mine. In Iowa, territorial instincts ran deep. No one would be allowed to steal the position that rightfully belonged to me. I tilted my head slightly, my gaze piercing through Cullen as a breathtaking smile curved my lips. Over the next month, if you dare to lay so much as a finger on what's mine, or play any dirty tricks behind my back, my voice softened to a lover's whisper, yet it carried a cold, deadly edge, I will personally erase you from the Kendall family. In the ruthless competition between Iowa's industrial families, ruthlessness was a necessary virtue. Showing mercy to one's enemies was a betrayal of oneself. A wave of icy hostility swept through the hall in an instant. Cullen's pupils contracted almost imperceptibly, but his face remained expressionless. My only duty is to safeguard the interests of the Kendall family. Nothing more. He tried to hide his ambition behind the guise of family interests, unaware that I had already seen through him completely. I smiled and turned away, ignoring everyone else as I strode toward my bedroom on the second floor. I would reclaim everything that was mine, for myself, and for the true glory of the Kendall family. On Iowa's soil, only the strong could stand at the top. Chapter 4, The Gamble That Shook the Ground, Theodore Lane's Arrogance. Early the next morning, the system's warning tone sounded, laced with the threat of punishment, time remaining, 23 hours 55 minutes. Slacking off on the mission will result in a minor penalty. A faint yet sharp electric current surged through my body, sending a stabbing pain across my limbs. I sneered silently where no one could see. Impatient already? It seemed even higher-dimensional beings had their weaknesses. Just like the businessmen of Iowa, they cared only about results and had no patience for waiting. Ignoring the discomfort, I walked calmly through the gates of the elite academy affiliated to the University of Iowa. The morning sun bathed the campus, illuminating the familiar buildings, the library, the laboratories, the concert hall. Every corner held memories of my past. Ms. Ella Kendall. A clear, melodious voice sounded behind me, its strange resonance instantly silencing the noisy air around me. I paused for a moment before turning around slowly. Theodore Lane walked toward me, parting the crowd as he came. Clad in a pure white academy uniform, he carried himself with the dignity of someone in royal attire. The golden falcon badge on his chest, a symbol of supreme authority, shone brightly in the morning light, almost blinding. This badge, the insignia of the student council president, represented absolute power within the school. With his high, straight nose and perfectly proportioned figure, every move he made exuded the centuries-old grace and authority of an ancient industrial family. The Lane family had thrived in Iowa for hundreds of years, growing from a small farm into a biotechnology giant. This legacy gave Theodore an inherent air of superiority. The system certainly had an eye for talent. Each of its chosen targets was a child of destiny, born into wealth and privilege, yet also blessed with extraordinary talent and ability. They were the future rulers of Iowa. President Theodore, what an honor, I raised an eyebrow, meeting his unfathomable smoky gray eyes with a perfectly measured mix of distance and amusement. Whatever could be so important that it brings you all the way here in person? In Iowa, politeness was a basic social norm, but I would never grovel to him because of his status. A perfect yet utterly cold smile tugged at Theodore's lips. Ms. Kendall, I was deeply impressed by the financial report you submitted yesterday. Would you do me the honor of accompanying me to the student council office to discuss it? His tone sounded gentle, yet it carried an unrefusable sense of authority. He was used to being in control and hated being caught off guard. I'd be remiss to refuse, I replied with an equally flawless smile, though it didn't reach my eyes. In Iowa, cooperation was built on equality. I would not be intimidated by his aura. Beneath the gaze of countless eyes, filled with jealousy, curiosity, and shock, I followed Theodore into the student council building. The corridors were lined with priceless world paintings, and ancient, expensive Eastern porcelain vases held wild roses native to Iowa, reduced to mere decorations. The luxury and authority here were unchanged from when I had led the council 5 years ago, yet there was an unfamiliar coldness to it. Theodore's management style was far stricter, and far more ruthless, than mine had been. Theodore did not sit down. Instead, he stood before the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to the morning light. I don't like to waste time or beat around the bush. You know exactly what your report means for the Lane family's core project. He cut straight to the chase, no nonsense. In Iowa's industrial circles, efficiency was everything. Time was money. I leaned back lazily on the sofa, my slender fingers resting casually on the armrest as I tapped the expensive leather gently. My eyes held a knowing glint as I watched him silently. I knew exactly what he wanted, to make me keep the secret, and even to use my skills to perfect his project. But I had no intention of giving in so easily. Theodore turned around, his eyes sharp as a blade behind his glasses. If I want you to keep the contents of this report completely confidential and ensure the smooth progress of the Lane family's project, I'm prepared to grant you one request. This was a transaction, rooted in his confidence in his ability to control the situation. He assumed I would ask for something like the restoration of my family's status or wealth, things he could easily provide. The promise of President Theodore certainly sounds valuable, I finally spoke, my voice cold and laced with lazy mockery. But is it worth more than the Lane family's painstakingly crafted, long-cherished grand plan? I drew out the words deliberately, my gaze sweeping over his perfect yet cold face as if appraising a commodity. I wanted him to know that I was not someone who could be bought cheaply. Theodore's eyebrows furrowed almost imperceptibly behind his glasses. He sneered silently, waiting for me to make an exorbitant demand. He had already planned his response, and if necessary, he wouldn't hesitate to resort to underhanded tactics. The Lane family's roots in Iowa ran deep. Taking down a girl with no family support would be child's play. However, I suddenly changed the subject, a breathtaking smile spreading across my lips. I am willing to keep this secret for you, completely. Theodore's eyes narrowed slightly. What do you want? He breathed a quiet sigh of relief, assuming I was finally going to name my price. Where there was desire, there was weakness, and weakness could be exploited. I leaned forward slightly, resting my elbows on the broad desk as I laced my fingers together under my chin. Looking up at him, silhouetted against the light, my smile was bold and aggressive. I want to make a bet with you. We'll compete for the top spot in the school in next month's exam. In Iowa, strength was the best wager. Only by defeating him could I truly earn his respect. I paused, savoring the flicker of surprise in his eyes before dropping the bombshell. And if you lose, you'll hand over the student council president's position to me. The presidency was not just a symbol of honor, it was a critical platform for controlling school resources and connecting with the heirs of other industrial families. I needed this position to execute my plan. My gaze wandered unapologetically over his chiseled jawline, down to his Adam's apple, across his broad chest framed by his uniform, and finally back to his eyes. My lips parted softly. Additionally, you'll be my bed partner. In the power games of Iowa's industrial families, control was the ultimate goal. I wanted to reduce him from his lofty position as president to someone I could command at will. A surge of intense disgust and contempt flooded Theodore's heart, spreading like venomous vines. So this was what it had all been about. The supposed return of her talent, the threats, they had all been a ploy for her own vanity and the same sordid obsession as the other attackers. He was convinced she was still trying to cling to him by any means necessary. The look in his eyes turned icy cold behind his glasses, but he forced down his revulsion. He couldn't afford to lose his composure, that would be a sign of weakness. Target Theodore Lane. Favorability rating, 50. The system's cold notification echoed in my mind. Yet my smile only widened, growing more enchanting by the second. I didn't care about his disgust. Leaning back against the sofa, I scanned him slowly from head to toe, my gaze purely that of someone appraising an object, cold, calculating, and utterly detached. This was not admiration or infatuation. It was the ruthless objectification of a man, the gaze of a hunter sizing up her prize. I wanted him to understand that in this game, he was no longer the one in control. The office fell deathly silent. Their eyes clashed in mid-air, a silent battle of dignity, strength, and dominance. After a long while, Theodore finally spoke, his voice low and steady, yet dripping with icy malice. Very well. He had agreed. His consent stemmed from the overwhelming, unshakable arrogance rooted deep in his bones. He refused to believe that I could bridge a 3-year gap in just half a month and defeat him. In the history of the elite academy affiliated to the University of Iowa, no one had ever risen from last place to first in such a short time, least of all against him, the perpetual top student. He thought back to the past 3 years, me standing at the school gate clutching cheap Lucky Stars, being dragged away by security for chasing Elias at a banquet, slashing my wrists and begging Samuel for forgiveness. Could such a terrible waste of time really have been a mere act of patience? In his eyes, it was absurd. A truly talented, ambitious person would never squander 3 years on such meaningless foolishness. And if you lose? Theodore's voice held the cold weight of judgment, like a falcon closing in on its prey. He wanted me to understand that the stakes of this gamble were not his alone. I met his gaze, my smile arrogant and bold. If I lose, I'm at your mercy. I'll personally perfect the Lane family's project with my own hands. And I'll leave the elite academy affiliated to the University of Iowa forever, never to appear before any of you again. On the surface, this bet seemed to stack the odds against me. But I knew, I could not lose. The 3-year gap had been nothing more than a brief respite. My talent and ability had never truly faded. This final offer erased all of Theodore's remaining doubts. He was convinced I had been driven to despair, which was why I had proposed such extreme terms. In his eyes, I was already defeated. Theodore studied me for a long moment before nodding slowly. It's a deal. He held out his hand, a traditional gesture in Iowa's business negotiations, signifying the sealing of an agreement. But I did not take his hand. Instead, I remained seated on the sofa, nodding slightly. I hope you'll keep your promise. In my eyes, he was not yet worthy of shaking my hand. Only when I won the bet would he understand what true strength looked like. Stepping out of the student council building, the sun shone brightly overhead. I looked up at the sky, a confident smile spreading across my lips. Iowa's sky was a clear, boundless blue, just like my future, filled with endless possibilities. The game had only just begun. Everything that had been taken from me, everything I had endured, every memory that had been forgotten, I would reclaim it all. And those arrogant young men, who had looked down on me for so long, would finally pay the price for their conceit and contempt. On the soil of Iowa, only the strong would have the last laugh. The 44-hour mission countdown continued to tick away. Elias's emotional fluctuation value still had not reached the target. I turned around and headed straight for the music building. There, I would find my next target, the music fanatic Elias Hansen. And the key to winning him over lay hidden within the Steinway piano he cherished more than life itself. That piano, the prize he had won at the Iowa Youth Piano Competition, held not only his purest passion for music but also our shared memories. I knew that only by touching the softest part of his heart could I truly stir his emotions.